They treated him like furniture, a servant, a nobody. When Victoria Brooks hired a black car for the worst night of her life, she thought she was just crying to a kind, elderly driver named Alessio. She didn't know that the man behind the wheel wasn't an employee. He was the owner of the entire city. And when her ex-fiancé humiliated her in front of Chicago's elite, he didn't realize he wasn't insulting a waitress. He was insulting the Don's future wife. Watch what happens when the driver finally takes the gloves off and gives one single deadly order. The rain in Chicago didn't just fall. It hammered against the pavement, turning the grim streets of the Loop into slick, black mirrors. Victoria Brooks adjusted her grip on her portfolio, her knuckles white. She was shivering, not just from the cold, but from the adrenaline of pure, unadulterated panic. She checked her phone. 2:45 p.m. The pitch at Sterling and Company was at 3 p.m. Her usual rideshare app was showing a searching for driver wheel of death. "Come on," she whispered, tapping the screen aggressively. "Please." Victoria was 26, a junior architect with more talent in her pinky finger than her boss, Braden Sterling, had in his entire lineage. But talent didn't pay the rent on her studio apartment in Wicker Park, and it certainly didn't pay for the care home fees for her mother. She needed this promotion. Braden had promised her that if she nailed the design for the new waterfront casino, the senior associate position was hers. Finally, a notification popped up. Black car arriving. Plate 7X99. It wasn't the economy ride she ordered. A sleek, obsidian black Mercedes Maybach pulled up to the curb, displacing a puddle of grimy water. It looked like a shark gliding through dark water. Victoria hesitated. This car cost more than her student loans. The back window rolled down a fraction. "Victoria?" A deep, gravelly voice echoed from inside. "Yes, I think I ordered a standard ride," she stammered, opening the back door. "System glitch," the man in the front seat said. He didn't turn around. He wore a simple black cap, pulled low, and a dark coat. "Get in. You're late." Victoria didn't argue. She slid onto the cream leather seats, the interior smelling faintly of cedarwood and expensive tobacco, not the usual pine air freshener scent. "Sterling Tower," she breathed out, smoothing her wet skirt. "And please hurry. If I'm late, he'll kill me." The driver glanced at her through the rear-view mirror. His eyes were dark, almost black, framed by thick lashes. There was a scar running through his left eyebrow that gave him a dangerous, rugged look, at odds with the polished car. "He?" the driver asked, pulling into traffic with a smoothness that defied physics. "Braden Sterling," Victoria muttered, opening her compact mirror to fix her mascara. "My boss, also my ex. Also the man who currently holds my entire career in his manicured hands." The driver made a noise, a low rumble in his chest. "Sounds like a charmer." "He's a shark," Victoria corrected, "and I'm the chum. But I need this account. If I land the Venetian project, I can finally move my mum to a better facility. The one she's in, it smells like boiled cabbage and despair." She realized she was rambling. She always rambled when she was nervous. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't bore you with my drama. I'm Victoria, Alessio," the driver replied. He didn't offer a last name. "Nice to meet you, Alessio. You're a lifesaver." "We'll see," Alessio murmured. He drove aggressively but with precision, cutting through the gridlock on Michigan Avenue like he owned the pavement. Victoria noticed something odd. As they approached a red light, 2 black SUVs flanked them. They didn't pass, they just hovered, matching their speed perfectly. When they pulled up to the gleaming glass spire of Sterling Tower, Alessio put the car in park. "Go get him, Victoria," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "And remember, sharks only bite when they smell blood. Don't bleed." Victoria paused, her hand on the door handle. It was strange advice from a driver. "Thank you, Alessio. Wish me luck." "You don't need luck," he said, his eyes meeting hers in the mirror again. There was an intensity there that made her breath hitch. "You have talent, That's dangerous enough. Victoria scrambled out of the car, rushing into the revolving doors. She didn't see Alessio lift a radio to his lips as he watched her go. "Target is inside," Alessio said, his voice dropping the casual tone. "Keep eyes on the perimeter. If Sterling touches her, burn the building down." The boardroom on the 40th floor was freezing. It was a power move. Braden kept the thermostat low so everyone else would be uncomfortable while he sat in his cashmere vest, perfectly acclimated. Victoria stood at the head of the long mahogany table. Her schematics were displayed on the massive 85-inch monitors. She had poured 3 months of her life into these designs. The casino looked like a flowing wave of glass and steel, respecting the Chicago skyline while offering something entirely new. And that, Victoria concluded, her voice steady, despite her trembling hands, is how we maximize the floor space while keeping the aesthetic integrity. Silence filled the room. Braden Sterling sat at the far end, spinning a Mont Blanc pen between his fingers. He was handsome in a generic trust fund way. Blonde hair slicked back, teeth whitened to a blinding degree. Beside him sat Tiffany Roch, the daughter of the casino's investor. She was looking at her phone, scrolling through Instagram, clearly bored. "It's cute," Tiffany said, not looking up. Victoria blinked. "Cute?" Braden chuckled. "What Tiffany means, Victoria, is that it's charming. But it's small. It meets all the square footage requirements, Braden. In fact, it exceeds them by—" "It's not about the math, sweetie," Braden interrupted, standing up. He walked over to her, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive scotch and arrogance. "It's about the vibe. This design, it screams budget. It screams intern." "I'm not an intern," Victoria said, her jaw tightening. "I'm a junior architect." "Only because I let you be," Braden whispered, low enough so the other board members couldn't hear. "Let's be honest, Victoria. You were a diversity hire, a charity case. You think you belong in this room with the big dogs?" Victoria felt the sting of tears but refused to let them fall. "I did the work, Braden. This design is solid." Braden turned to the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can agree that while Miss Brooks has made a valiant effort, we need something with more pedigree. Tiffany has actually introduced me to a firm from Milan, Rossi & Sons. They'll be taking over the Venetian project." The room spun. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. You outsourced it. You promised me." "I promised you an opportunity," Braden shrugged, returning to his seat. "You failed to impress. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have real business to discuss. You can see yourself out." "Oh, and Victoria?" She stopped at the door, her heart shattered. "Grab us some coffees on your way out. 2 lattes, oat milk. Thanks." Laughter rippled through the room. It was the coffee comment that broke her. It was the ultimate reduction of her worth. Victoria walked out of the boardroom, past the receptionist who gave her a pitying look, and into the elevator. As soon as the doors closed, she slumped against the metal wall, a sob escaping her throat. She exited the building in a daze. The rain had stopped, leaving the city grey and cold. She didn't know where to go. She couldn't go home to the empty apartment. She couldn't go to her mum and tell her she failed. She stood on the curb, hugging her portfolio, feeling small and invisible. Suddenly the sleek black Maybach pulled up again. The window rolled down. "Rough meeting?" Alessio asked. Victoria looked at him, and the dam broke. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Get in," he commanded. This time he didn't wait. He got out of the car, tall, broad-shouldered, imposing in his dark coat, and opened the back door for her. He ushered her in like she was royalty, shielding her from the wind with his body. Alessio didn't ask where she wanted to go. He drove them toward the Navy Pier, parking in a secluded spot overlooking the churning waters of Lake Michigan. He killed the engine. "Talk," he said. He had turned in his seat to face her. Without the driving cap, she saw his face clearly for the first time. He was older than her, maybe mid-30s, with silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. His eyes were hard, but his expression was attentive. "He fired me from the project." Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "He gave it to some Italian firm. And then he asked me to get coffee. Like I was his maid." Alessio's hands tightened on the steering wheel until the leather creaked. "Braden Sterling did this?" "Yes. He said I didn't have the pedigree. He said I was a charity case." She laughed bitterly. "Maybe he's right. I'm just a girl from the South Side trying to play dress-up in corporate America." "He's wrong," Alessio said, his voice dropping an octave. It sounded like tectonic plates shifting. "And he's a fool. It doesn't matter. He wins. He always wins. His father owns half the city, and the other half is scared of him." Alessio reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a silver flask. He handed it to her. "Brandy. Drink." Victoria took a swig. It burned, but it settled her nerves. "Why are you being so nice to me, Alessio? You're just a driver. You don't need to deal with my mess." "I'm not just a driver," he said cryptically. "And maybe I hate bullies. He's not just a bully. He's powerful. He has connections with the mob, or so the rumors say. That's why no one touches him." Alessio threw his head back and laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. "The mob? Sterling thinks he has connections with the Famiglia. That's what he says? He says he pays protection money to the Conti syndicate." Alessio's amusement vanished instantly. His eyes went cold. "He says that, does he?" "Yeah, why?" "Because," Alessio said, turning back to the windshield, staring out at the grey water. "The Conti syndicate doesn't take protection money from rats, and they certainly don't like their name being used to scare women." Victoria sighed, leaning her head against the cool glass. "Well, it doesn't matter. I'm done. I have to find a new job by Monday, or my mum gets evicted." Alessio started the car. The engine purred like a sleeping beast waking up. "Where are we going?" Victoria asked. "I'm taking you home, Victoria. Get some sleep. Put on your best dress tomorrow night." "Why? What's tomorrow?" "The Sterling Gala," Alessio said. "The annual charity ball at the Ritz-Carlton. Braden will be there announcing the new casino project. I can't go there. I wasn't invited, and I definitely can't show my face after today." "You're going," Alessio said firmly, "and you won't be going alone." "Who am I going with?" Alessio met her eyes in the mirror. A small, dangerous smile played on his lips. "You're going with your driver." Victoria frowned. "You, but—" "No offense, Alessio, but they have a dress code. Black tie. And you think I can't clean up?" He winked. "Trust me, Victoria. Tomorrow night, Braden Sterling is going to learn a very expensive lesson about pedigree." Victoria didn't know why, but she believed him. There was a gravity to him, a weight that suggested he was more than he appeared. But she couldn't possibly guess the truth. She didn't know that the man driving her home wasn't Alessio the chauffeur. He was Alessandro Conti, the capo dei capi, the head of the Conti syndicate, the man Braden Sterling claimed to pay, but had never actually met. And Alessandro Conti had just decided that Braden Sterling's subscription to life had expired. The next day, a package arrived at Victoria's apartment. No return address. Inside was a dress. Not just a dress, a weapon made of emerald silk. It was a backless gown that looked like it had been sculpted specifically for her body. Tucked into the folds was a diamond necklace that looked heavy enough to anchor a boat. A note was attached on heavy cream cardstock. 7 p.m. Don't be late. Victoria stared at the mirror. She hardly recognized herself. The silk draped over her curves, the emerald color making her eyes pop. She looked dangerous. She looked expensive. At 7 p.m. sharp, the black Maybach was downstairs. But when she walked out, Alessio wasn't in the driver's seat. A young man with a buzz cut was holding the door open. "Where's Alessio?" she asked, clutching her clutch bag. "He's waiting for you at the venue, Mum," the young man said, bowing his head respectfully. "My name is Dante. I'll be your transport. The ride to the Ritz-Carlton was a blur. Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. What was Alessio doing? Was he going to crash the party in his chauffeur uniform? They would throw him out. They would throw her out. The Ritz was swarming with paparazzi. As the car pulled up to the red carpet, Dante hopped out and opened her door. Camera flashes blinded her. She stepped out, head high, just as she had practiced. She scanned the crowd for Alessio. She expected to see him standing by the valets, maybe in a rented tuxedo. She didn't see him. She walked up the stairs, trembling. The ballroom was packed with Chicago's elite. Crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, a string quartet playing soft pop covers. And there, in the center of the room, holding court, was Braden. He had his arm around Tiffany Roche. He looked like the king of the world. Victoria took a breath and stepped into the room. The emerald dress caught the light. Heads turned. Conversations stalled. She saw Braden's eyes widen. He dropped his arm from Tiffany's waist. He marched over to her, his face flushing red. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, grabbing her elbow. "I fired you. You're trespassing." "I'm a guest," Victoria said, pulling her arm away. "Guest? Whose guest?" "The janitor's." Braden laughed cruelly. "Security! Get this trash out of here." Two burly security guards started moving towards them. Tiffany sashayed over, a smirk plastered on her face. "Oh, honey, did you spend your severance pay on a rental dress? You look desperate." "She's leaving," Braden announced to the room, enjoying the audience. "Sorry, everyone. Disgruntled ex-employee. It's sad, really." The security guard reached for Victoria. "Don't touch her." The voice didn't shout. It didn't have to. It cut through the noise of the ballroom like a whip crack. It was deep, authoritative, and terrifyingly calm. The entire room went silent. The music stopped. At the top of the grand staircase stood a man. He was wearing a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He wasn't wearing a chauffeur's cap. His hair was styled back, revealing the sharp, predatory angles of his face. He radiated power. Pure, unadulterated violence wrapped in civility. It was Alessio. But it wasn't the Alessio who drove the car. This man walked down the stairs with the slow, deliberate gait of a predator entering a pen of sheep. The security guards froze. They looked at the man, then went pale. They backed away from Victoria instantly, bowing their heads. "Mr. Conti," the head of security whispered, his voice trembling. Braden frowned, looking confused. "Conti? Who is—" Then the color drained from Braden's face. He knew the name. Everyone in Chicago knew the name. They just rarely saw the face. Alessio walked straight up to Victoria. He didn't look at Braden. He didn't look at Tiffany. He took Victoria's hand and kissed her knuckles. "You look breathtaking, Cara," he said softly. Then he turned to Braden. The warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced by a void. "I believe," Alessio said, his voice echoing in the silent hall. "You were just asking my date to leave." Braden stammered. Your date? "Sir, I didn't know. She's just an intern." "I thought—" "You thought wrong." Alessio stepped closer. Braden shrank back. "You seem to use my name a lot, Mr. Sterling. I hear you tell people we are partners, that I protect you. It's just business talk," Braden squeaked, sweat beading on his forehead. "I don't have partners," Alessio said, loud enough for the press to hear. "And I don't protect men who insult women, especially not this woman." Alessio snapped his fingers. Dante and 3 other men in suits materialized from the shadows, surrounding Braden and Tiffany. "The party is over for you, Braden," Alessio said. "You can't do this," Braden shouted, trying to regain some dignity. "I'm Braden Sterling. I own this city." Alessio leaned in close, so only Braden and Victoria could hear. "You don't own anything. You're a tenant. And your lease is up." The silence in the Ritz-Carlton ballroom was heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a gunshot. 300 of Chicago's wealthiest citizens stood frozen, champagne flutes halfway to their lips, watching the impossible unfold. Alessandro Conti, the mythical boogeyman of the underworld, a man most people thought lived in a fortress in Sicily, was standing on the red carpet, adjusting the cuff of his shirt. Braden Sterling, moments ago the master of ceremonies, looked like a child caught stealing from the collection plate. He tried to laugh, a desperate, wheezing sound. "Mr. Conti," Braden stammered, his hands trembling violently. This is a misunderstanding. I was just joking with Victoria. We have a rapport. She knows that." He turned to Victoria, his eyes pleading. "Tell him, Victoria. Tell him it was a joke." Victoria looked at the man who had tormented her for 2 years. She looked at the sweat dripping down his temple, staining his expensive collar. She felt a strange calmness wash over her. "It wasn't a joke, Braden," she said, her voice clear and ringing through the hall. "You humiliated me. You stole my work. And you treated me like a servant." Alessandro's hand rested on the small of Victoria's back. It was a warm, heavy weight that grounded her. He looked at Braden with bored indifference, which was far more terrifying than anger. "You see, Braden," Alessandro began, his voice smooth as velvet, but sharp as a razor, "I did a little digging while I was driving Miss Brooks around yesterday. I looked into your empire." Alessandro signaled to Dante. The young man stepped forward and handed Alessandro a tablet. "Sterling and Company is currently leveraged at 400%, Alessandro read, scrolling casually. "You borrowed money from the Petrov Bratva to cover your gambling debts in Macau. You forged the environmental reports for the Venetian project. And, most insultingly, you've been telling the Petrovs that I back you, so they wouldn't break your legs." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Tiffany Roche, who had been clinging to Braden's arm, recoiled as if he were radioactive. She stepped away, smoothing her dress, putting 5 feet of distance between them. That's a lie!" Braden shrieked, his composure shattering. "He's lying! He's a criminal!" "I am a criminal," Alessandro agreed, handing the tablet back to Dante. "But I am an honest one. You, Braden? You're a fraud." Alessandro turned to the crowd. "The Venetian project belongs to the architect who designed it. From this moment on, Conti Holdings is acquiring the debt of Sterling and Company. We are seizing all assets." He looked down at Victoria. "And we are appointing Miss Brooks as the lead architect and CEO of the new development firm." Victoria's mouth fell open. "Alessandro, I accept it," he whispered to her. "It's yours." Braden snapped. The humiliation, the financial ruin, the loss of his status. It was too much. His face twisted into a mask of pure hate. He reached into his tuxedo jacket. "You think you can take everything from me?" Braden screamed, pulling out a small silver pistol. It was a coward's gun, shaking in his grip. He pointed it not at Alessandro, but at Victoria. "If I go down, she goes with me." The crowd screamed. People dove under tables. Time seemed to slow down. Victoria stared at the barrel of the gun. She couldn't move. Alessandro didn't flinch. He didn't dive. He didn't panic. He simply stepped in front of Victoria, shielding her body with his own. He looked at the gun, then up at Braden's eyes. "You have made a grave error," Alessandro said softly. Braden's finger tightened on the trigger. "Drop him," Alessandro said. It was the order, the deadly order. It didn't come from Alessandro's gun. It came from the shadows. A single shot rang out from the balcony level, a suppressed thwip that sounded like a heavy book falling. Braden screamed as his hand exploded in a mist of red. The pistol clattered to the floor. Before Braden could even drop to his knees, Dante and 2 other guards were on him. They didn't prioritize his medical needs. They slammed him face first into the marble floor, zip-tying his hands behind his back with brutal efficiency. Alessandro stepped over the sobbing, bleeding form of Braden Sterling. He looked at Dante. "Get this trash out of my sight," Alessandro commanded, his voice devoid of pity. "Take him to the rail yard. Make sure he understands the price of pointing a weapon at my wife." Wife? Braden sputtered through a mouthful of blood and broken teeth as he was dragged away. She's not your wife! Alessandro adjusted his cufflinks, looking down at the streak of blood on the floor. Not yet, Alessandro muttered, but a man can hope. He turned to Victoria, checking her face for shock. Are you hurt? Victoria shook her head, her eyes wide. You just... I handled a personnel issue, Alessandro said. He offered her his arm. Now I believe we have a gala to leave. The food here is terrible anyway. The heavy door of the armored SUV slammed shut, sealing out the noise of the city and the screams of the gala attendees. Inside, the silence was instant and oppressive. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of Victoria's lungs. She was sitting on plush leather, the same scent of cedarwood and tobacco enveloping her that she had smelled the day before. But everything was different now. The man sitting next to her wasn't Alessio, the kind-eyed driver who listened to her complaints about office politics. He was Alessandro Conti, the capo, the king, a man who had just ordered the destruction of a human being with the same casual tone one might use to order a sandwich. The convoy of 3 black SUVs sped away from the Ritz-Carlton, moving in a tight defensive formation. Victoria stared at her hands. They were trembling so violently that the sequins on her dress shimmered like restless water. Breathe, Alessandro said. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. He reached toward a hidden compartment in the center console. Victoria flinched, shrinking back against the door. Alessandro paused, his hand hovering in mid-air. A flash of pain crossed his eyes, so fleeting that if she had blinked, she would have missed it. I am pouring a drink, Victoria, he said softly. I am not reaching for a weapon. He pulled out a crystal decanter and 2 heavy tumblers. The amber liquid sloshed as the car took a sharp turn, but Alessandro's hand remained steady. He poured a generous measure of scotch and extended it to her. Drink. It will stop the shaking. Victoria took the glass. She didn't sip it. She gulped it down. The alcohol burned her throat, a welcome fire that distracted her from the cold knot of fear in her stomach. You ruined him, Victoria whispered, the words finally escaping her throat. Braden. You destroyed his entire life in 5 minutes. I revealed his life, Alessandro corrected. He took a slow sip of his own drink, watching the city blur past the tinted windows. Braden Sterling was a house of cards, built on a foundation of lies and other people's money. All I did was open a window and let the wind blow. And the rail yard? Victoria turned to look at him. What happens at the rail yard? Alessandro turned his head. His eyes were dark, abyssal pools. Justice happens, Victoria. The kind of justice the courts are too polite to administer. He pointed a gun at you. In my world, that is a forfeiture of one's right to a comfortable future. Who are you? She asked, her voice cracking. Really? Are you the driver who gave me advice? Or are you... this? I am both, Alessandro said. He set his glass down and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I was born into this life, Victoria. My father was the Don. His father was the Don. I was raised to be a weapon. I was taught that mercy is a luxury we cannot afford. He looked down at his hands, hands that were manicured, elegant, and lethal. But the driving, he continued, a wistful note entering his voice. That is my escape. When I am behind the wheel, nobody wants me to kill anyone. Nobody asks me for favors. I am just a man taking people where they need to go. Yesterday, my usual driver called in sick. I took the cap. I took the keys. I just wanted silence. He looked up, locking eyes with her, and then a soaking wet architect climbed into my back seat and told me about a world I didn't know existed. A world where people are cruel not for survival, but for sport. You intrigued me, Victoria. You were fighting a war with no weapons. I decided to give you some ammunition. Victoria felt tears pricking her eyes. You scared me back there. You looked like a monster. Sometimes, Alessandro said, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear. You need a monster to keep the other wolves at bay. Victoria leaned into his touch instinctively, then pulled back, conflicted. Before she could speak, the driver in the front seat, the real Dante, shouted into the intercom, "Contact! Rear flank! We have tails!" The atmosphere in the car shifted instantly. The luxury melted away, replaced by the tension of a bunker. "Report!" Alessandro barked, his voice dropping into a commander's growl. 2 SUVs, no plates, approaching fast on the starboard side. It's the Petrovs, boss. They must have been waiting for the signal from Sterling. "Hold formation," Alessandro ordered. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. He looked like a man whose dinner plans were being inconvenienced. Victoria grabbed his arm. "What's happening?" "Braden was in debt to the Russian mob," Alessandro said quickly, checking the magazine of a pistol he pulled from a holster beneath his jacket. "He likely promised them he'd deliver me tonight in exchange for clearing his debt. He failed." Crash. The impact was bone-jarring. A heavy vehicle slammed into the side of their SUV, sending them skidding across the wet asphalt. Victoria screamed as the world tilted. The armored Maybach was heavy, but physics was heavier. The car spun 180 degrees, tires screeching like banshees, smoke filling the cabin. "Get down!" Alessandro roared. He threw himself over her, using his broad body as a human shield. He pressed her face into the leather seat, covering her head with his arms. Bullets began to hammer against the car. It sounded like someone was throwing handfuls of gravel against the windows, but louder, angrier. Thud, 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 thud. The bulletproof glass held, spider-webbing into opaque patterns of white cracks. But it wouldn't hold forever. "Dante! Status!" Alessandro yelled over the noise. "Engine block took a hit. We're immobilized, boss. We're sitting ducks." Alessandro cursed in Italian. He looked down at Victoria. She was curled in a ball, shaking. He grabbed her face between his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Victoria, listen to me closely," he said, his intensity burning through her panic. "I am going to get out. I am going to draw their fire." "No!" she cried, gripping his lapels. "They'll kill you!" "They will try," he said with a dark smirk. "But they are Russians fighting in Chicago. This is my city." He reached under the seat and pulled out a heavier weapon, a compact submachine gun. He racked the slide. "Stay on the floor. Count to 100. Do not open this door until you hear my voice. Do you understand?" "Alessandro, please." He kissed her hard on the mouth, a kiss of adrenaline and desperation. "Start counting." He kicked the door open. The noise of the outside world roared in. Sirens shouting, and the deafening crack of automatic fire. Alessandro rolled out onto the pavement, and the door slammed shut behind him. "1," Victoria sobbed, pressing her hands over her ears. 2, 3. Outside, hell had broken loose. Alessandro moved not like a man, but like a phantom. He used the cover of the smoking vehicle, moving low and fast. He could hear the shouting of the Petrov soldiers. They were disorganized, relying on brute force. They didn't know who they were dealing with. He saw 2 men advancing on the car. Alessandro didn't hesitate. 2 shots, double taps to the chest. They dropped before they even saw him. 15, 16, 17. Inside the car, Victoria could feel the vibrations of the fight. The car rocked as a body slammed against it. She squeezed her eyes shut, visualizing Alessandro, not the monster, but the man who had bought her address, the man who had listened. 42, 43. "Cover fire!" Alessandro shouted to his men. Dante and the other guards were engaging the second van. Alessandro saw the leader of the hit squad taking aim at the rear window where Victoria was hiding. A cold rage, darker than anything he had ever felt, surged through him. It wasn't business anymore. He broke cover. He sprinted across the open ground, bullets kicking up sparks around his feet. He raised his weapon and fired a precise burst. The gunman fell. Alessandro reached the enemy van, pulled the pin on a flashbang grenade he kept on his belt, and tossed it through the driver's window. Boom! A blinding light and a concussion wave rattled the street. The shooting from the Russians stopped, replaced by groans of disorientation. "Secure them," Alessandro ordered his men. "Leave one alive for a message. Finish the rest." 89. 90. Victoria's throat was raw. The shooting had stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It was heavy with the smell of burnt rubber and gunpowder. Was he dead? Had he sacrificed himself for her? 99. 100. She held her breath. The door handle clicked. Victoria flinched, curling tighter into a ball. The door swung open. "Victoria!" It was him. She looked up. Alessandro stood framed by the streetlights and the smoke. His tuxedo jacket was gone. His white shirt was stained with soot and a streak of blood on the sleeve. His hair was wild, wind-blown. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. But he was alive. Victoria didn't think. She didn't analyze the morality of the situation. She scrambled out of the car and threw herself at him. He caught her, groaning slightly as the impact jarred a bruise on his ribs, but he held her tight. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling the scent of her perfume, which was miraculously still there beneath the smell of war. "I told you," he murmured against her skin. "I'm a good driver, but the traffic in this city is terrible." Victoria laughed. It was a hysterical, sobbing sound. She pulled back to look at him, running her hands over his face, checking for injuries. "You're bleeding," she said, touching a cut on his cheek. "Not my blood," he said simply. He looked around at the carnage, the wrecked cars, the police sirens wailing in the distance, getting closer. "We have to go," he said. "The police are on my payroll, but it's better if we aren't here when the cameras arrive." He led her to the lead SUV, which was damaged but drivable. He opened the passenger door for her, helping her in with the same gentleness he had shown when he was just Alessio. He walked around to the driver's side. Dante tried to intercept him. "Boss, you're hurt. Let me drive." Alessandro shook his head. "No, I drive." He got in and started the engine. It sputtered, then roared to life. He looked over at Victoria. She was watching him with a look he hadn't expected. He expected fear. He expected revulsion. Instead, he saw awe and something else. "I can't go back to my apartment," Victoria said quietly. "Everyone knows where I live. Braden. The Petrovs." "I know," Alessandro said, putting the car into gear. "I have a safe house, a penthouse downtown. No one knows about it. You'll be safe there." "And you?" Victoria asked. "Will you be there?" Alessandro gripped the steering wheel. "If you want me to be. If you can stand to look at me after tonight." Victoria looked at the blood on his shirt. Then she looked at the scar through his eyebrow, the fierce determination in his jaw. She realized that for 26 years she had been looking for a man who would fight for her. She just never realized that the fight would be literal. She reached out and covered his hand on the gear stick. "I don't want to look at anyone else," she said. Alessandro turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "Then let's go home." He pressed the accelerator. The SUV surged forward, leaving the wreckage of the past behind them, driving toward a future that was dangerous, uncertain, and absolutely thrilling. Victoria Brooks wasn't just a passenger anymore. She had chosen her ride. 6 months later. The wind off Lake Michigan was usually biting in November, but tonight the air around the Navy Pier felt electric. Searchlights swept the sky, cutting through the darkness in crisscrossing beams of white and gold. Victoria Brooks stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling mirror in the penthouse suite of the Ritz-Carlton, the same hotel where, half a year ago, her life had almost ended. Tonight, however, she wasn't a guest crashing a party. She was the host. She smoothed the fabric of her gown. It was a custom piece from Milan, a shimmering column of silver that made her look like a statue forged from moonlight. "Stop fidgeting," a deep voice rumbled from the doorway. "You look perfect. Dangerous, but perfect." Victoria turned. Alessandro was leaning against the doorframe. He had traded his tactical gear and blood-stained shirts for a tuxedo that cost more than Braden Sterling's former annual salary. His hair was silvered at the temples, distinguished and severe, but his eyes held a warmth reserved solely for her. "I'm nervous," Victoria admitted, picking up her clutch. "The entire city is down there. The mayor, the governor, the investors. They're all waiting to see if the girl architect actually pulled it off." Alessandro walked over to her, his movements predatory grace. He stood behind her, his hands resting heavily on her shoulders, meeting her gaze in the mirror. "Let them look," he whispered, kissing the curve of her neck. "They aren't there to judge you, Victoria. They are there to worship you. You built the Venetian. You turned a failing, corrupt project into the crown jewel of Chicago. You are the queen tonight." "And you?" she asked, leaning back against him. "What are you?" "I am just the muscle," he smirked, "and the husband." Victoria smiled, twisting the massive diamond ring on her finger. They had married quietly 2 months ago, in a small chapel in Sicily, far away from the cameras and the violence. It was the only peace they had stolen for themselves. "Come," Alessandro said, offering his arm. "The car is waiting, and I believe you have a ribbon to cut." The arrival was chaos. The flashbulbs were blinding as the black Maybach pulled up to the red carpet. But this time Alessandro didn't hide. He stepped out first, buttoning his jacket, scanning the crowd with the practiced paranoia of a man who had survived a dozen wars. Once he was satisfied, he opened the door for Victoria. A roar went up from the crowd. "Victoria! Mrs. Conti! Over here!" They walked the carpet together. Victoria fielded questions with the poise of a veteran CEO. She spoke about structural integrity, about aesthetic flow, about revitalizing the waterfront. She didn't speak about the hostile takeover, the Petrov hit squad, or the fact that her husband was the capo of the most powerful syndicate in the Midwest. Inside, the Conti Brooks Venetian casino was breathtaking. It was a cathedral of vice and luxury. The ceiling was a flowing wave of glass, mimicking the lake outside. The gaming floor was hushed and opulent. Victoria gave her speech from a golden podium, her voice steady, amplifying through the massive hall. "Architecture is about legacy," she told the crowd of thousands. "It is about leaving something behind that says, 'We were here.' Some people try to build legacies on lies. We built this on truth and steel." Thunderous applause filled the room. Alessandro stood in the front row, his face unreadable to the public, but Victoria saw the pride burning in his eyes. After the speeches, the gala began. Champagne flowed like water. Victoria was cornered by the city planner, who was practically begging to approve her next zoning permit. "Excuse me," Victoria said politely, extracting herself. "I need a drink." She signaled for a waiter. "Champagne, Mrs. Conti?" a voice asked from behind her. Victoria froze. She knew that voice. It was thinner now, raspier, stripped of its arrogance, but she knew it. She turned slowly. Holding a silver tray of empty flutes was a man. He was gaunt, his skin sallow and grey. His hair, once blonde and perfectly coiffed, was thinning and greasy, combed over in a desperate attempt to hide the bald spots. He wore the generic, ill-fitting white jacket of the catering staff. His name tag hung crookedly on his lapel. Braden. It was Braden Sterling. He wouldn't look her in the eye. He stared at her diamond necklace, his hands shaking so badly the glasses on his tray clinked together like wind chimes. "Braden," Victoria said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was flat. "Hello, Victoria. I mean, Mrs. Conti," Braden mumbled, his eyes darting around nervously. He looked terrified that he might drop a glass. Alessandro appeared at Victoria's elbow instantly, sensing the shift in her mood. He didn't say a word. He just stared at Braden. Braden flinched violently, taking a step back. I was just clearing the glasses, Mr. Conti. I wasn't bothering her. Please." Victoria looked at the man who had once held her career in his hand. The man who had called her a charity case. The man who had tried to end her life because his ego couldn't handle her talent. She expected to feel hate. She expected to want to scream at him. Instead, she felt nothing. He was insignificant, a bug that had already been crushed. "I don't want champagne," Victoria said coolly. "Oh, of course," Braden stammered. "Whatever you want. I can get you a martini? A scotch?" Victoria tilted her head, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. "Actually, Braden," she said, her voice loud enough for the nearby socialites to hear, "I'd like a latte. Oat milk. Make sure it's hot." Braden's face went white. It was the exact order he had used to humiliate her in the boardroom 6 months ago. The circle was complete. We don't have an espresso machine at this station," Braden whispered, humiliated tears welling in his eyes. "Then run to the kitchen," Alessandro said. His voice was a low growl that made the hair on the back of Braden's neck stand up. "And don't keep my wife waiting." "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." Braden scurried away, limping heavily on the leg that the Petrovs had shattered before his arrest, a permanent reminder of his bad debts. Victoria watched him go. She felt a hand on the small of her back. "Was that satisfactory?" Alessandro asked quietly. "It was closure," Victoria replied. She turned to her husband. "You hired him?" "I bought the catering company," Alessandro shrugged, taking a sip of his bourbon. "He needed a job after he got out on parole. Nobody else would hire him. I thought it was only fair to give him an entry-level position. He has a lot to learn about service." Victoria laughed, a genuine, bubbling sound. "You are a terrible man, Alessandro Conti." "I am a just man," he corrected. "Now, are you done with this circus? I believe we have made an appearance." "But the latte?" Victoria teased. "He's running to get it." "Let him run," Alessandro said, taking her hand. "He can leave it on the table. We won't be here." They slipped out through the kitchen exit, bypassing the paparazzi and the sycophants. The cool night air of the alleyway was refreshing. The black Maybach was waiting, idling softly. Victoria walked toward the passenger door, but Alessandro stopped her. "Not tonight," he said. He tossed her the keys. Victoria caught them, surprised. "You want me to drive?" "It's your car, Victoria. It's your company. It's your city," Alessandro said, walking around to the passenger side. "I'm just along for the ride." Victoria looked at the keys in her hand. For so long, she had been a passenger in her own life, letting men like Braden steer her, letting circumstances dictate her route. Even with Alessandro, she had often relied on his protection. But tonight felt different. Tonight, she was the one in control. She slid into the driver's seat. The leather was cool and familiar. She adjusted the mirrors. Alessandro got in beside her, leaning back, closing his eyes with a content sigh. "Where to, Mr. Conti?" she asked, starting the engine. The V12 roared to life, a beast waking up. Alessandro opened one eye, looking at her with that intense, smouldering gaze that still made her knees weak. "Take me home, Victoria," he said. "Take me anywhere. As long as you are driving, I am safe." Victoria shifted into gear. She looked in the rearview mirror one last time. She saw the back door of the casino open, and Braden running out into the alley with a paper cup in his hand, looking frantically for them. She didn't stop. She didn't wave. She pressed the accelerator, and the Maybach shot forward, leaving the past in a cloud of exhaust. They sped onto Lakeshore Drive, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and neon. Victoria drove fast, confident, her hand resting on the center console. Alessandro covered her hand with his own. She wasn't the victim anymore. She wasn't the intern. She wasn't even the passenger. She was the driver, and the road to Kiora ahead was wide open. And that is the story of how a single ride changed everything. Braden Sterling learned that when you try to crush someone, you'd better make sure they don't have a guardian angel with a suppressed carbine and a fleet of armored cars. Victoria proved that sometimes the only way to win the game is to flip the board over and start fresh, with a little help from the underworld. From the boardroom to the getaway car, Victoria and Alessandro showed us that love isn't just about flowers and chocolates. Sometimes it's about bulletproof glass and vengeance served cold. What did you think of the ending? Was forcing Braden to serve the latte the perfect karma, or should Alessandro have let the Russians finish the job? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed The King in the Driver's Seat, please give this video a like and share it with a friend who needs a little drama in their life. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon. We have a brand new story coming tomorrow about a nanny who discovers her boss is actually a werewolf king. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.